this is our second to last presentation. So Allison was the Colorado Tree Coalition, and then Carl is the town arborist for the town of Carbondale. This is where EAB was found. Lucky Carl, you may remember his presentation from last year. So when these guys told me that they went to a prescriptive pruning presentation hosted by the ISA Rocky Mountain chapter this year and suggested they share with what they learned from it, I thought that was an awesome opportunity for us to hear what they took out of it without having to go to Denver. So take it away.
I'll just say that this presentation by no means really scratches the surface at all. But hopefully you'll have an idea of how we need to change the culture around pruning in our industry. And if you have the opportunity to go take the prescription pruning qualification course, do it. And I think Carl will agree with me there. So some of the goals for this presentation are to identify first order branches, review the terminology of the 3 basic cuts, pruning goals for mature and young trees, and then writing and reading a prescription for pruning. This one kind of blew my mind. Has anyone read the standard for pruning, NC standard? Okay. So how many pages long is it? See, I was thinking it was like 40 pages, but it's actually like the actual standard itself, the non-definition section and the acknowledgement section, it's only 7 pages. So that's it. And none of these pages tell you how to prune a tree. So that's where this comes in. And what we're trying to do is create trees that are compatible for our urban landscapes. And why does it, so this is a tree in the city of Alamosa. Why did we prune that tree that way? Clearance and visibility. Businesses complained. You can't see my sign, you can't see my store. And so we pruned it up, and who's taking track? A couple of you have taken track, so the tree risk qualification. And is that a little bit of a scary situation there? Yeah. And this is a tree, same species, a couple blocks away. It wasn't touched. Is this less concerning tree? Yeah. There's clearance above the roadway, and maybe it needs a little bit more above the street, but definitely more compatible and less scary risk-wise. And this is a tree. So I live in Aurora, but I have a project in Alamosa, so I'll be talking quite a bit about Alamosa. But this tree is in my community. This is my neighbor's tree. And the landscaper came in and cut all the lower branches off because probably mowing out operations, maybe some clearance issues above the sidewalk. But we're starting to promote that same pruning practice that we saw in the previous image where that tree is limbed up. And that's that.
Okay, so as part of the training, they started to talk about different ways that we could identify branches in the trees so that, you know, the prescriber could call out certain pruning to happen in different parts of the tree. So they started talking about this concept of identifying first order branches, and that's like one way. I had never heard of it. It sounds like it comes maybe from some other practices, but it's not really in our world as trees. Okay, yeah, so this is just before we get to first order, this is some general things about trees. So we call this the trunk, right? Above the trunk, call it the leader. And you have exterior branches, interior branches, small aspect ratio branch. That's something we'll talk more about later. That's another thing that we can call out branches too. Hey, do something to all the large or this large aspect ratio branch, right? Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but it's kind of like a codominant kind of thing going there. So if you have a large aspect ratio branch, that's like a smaller one. And
Range.
yeah, okay, branch clusters are all kind of so that's kind of like standard stuff that's out there now, right? When we look at trees and talk about it. Now, in the class, this is a slide from the class. They're trying to give us ways to be more specific, right? So if you have the trunk, this order of, first order, second order, third order. So if you have the main trunk of the tree, a branch that comes off the main trunk, we can call that a first order branch. As the first order branch goes out, the next branch that comes off the first order, call that a second order branch. As you go further out, you can call it a third order branch. So they're trying to give us more specific ways to call things out. So, example, say you don't want somebody to lion tail your tree, right? Like you don't want, when you're writing prescription, you don't want the tree worker to cut things from the interior. You could say, well, pruning cuts on third order branches. So that's going to keep them out on the ends of the whole branch, right? So they're trying to give us different terminology to be more specific. Now, I will admit, this can be easy to use if it's really clear to see what a first order branch is. But when you have multiple trunks, it gets a little hard to, it's a little bit hard to see it. So a good example like this one, you have a trunk, it's pretty clear that's a first order branch, right? So in this case, it could be useful to say in your pruning prescription, okay, prune on the ends of the first two, looks like there's two first order branches. That's pretty clear, right? And it can help you be more specific about that. But as we go up further, to me, and I think a lot of people probably in the class, it gets a little bit more confusing. Well, what's first order? It's like, well, that's like a codominant. So, okay, I guess that's first order, that's first, it gets a little bit more cluttered up there, right? Be a little bit difficult. However, for certain trees, it still does give us a more specific way to point things out. So it kind of depends on the situation. And this is like an example, I think it's a Siberian elm, right?
Yeah, it's a Siberian elm.
So this is like more of a multi-trunk tree, right? You can't see it with the leaves, but there's so many branch things going on there, it's hard to even call it out. So in that case, saying if it's first order gets a little bit tough, you could still say, let's work towards the third order, which will keep you out in the ends, right? But so that's part of the training. They trying to give us different common language to use, which is helpful. And okay, so aspect ratio. This is we're probably already familiar with this, but you can see this one. You have a lot of the same aspect ratio going on, right? So if we're talking about the structure of a tree, we want, we usually want to have a bigger, more dominant leader and smaller branches coming off of it. So with the aspect ratio, which, kind of more like this, these are smaller aspect ratio. So again, these are things that we can talk about and call out in our prescriptions saying, do a certain thing on the large aspect ratio branches in this part of the tree. So just trying to find that language for us.
Pruning cuts. So we have 3 basic cuts that are called out in the pruning standard. So what's a removal cut? In short, is when you are removing a small aspect ratio branch to a larger branch. And then a reduction cut. There we go. Is the opposite. So you're removing a large aspect ratio branch down to a branch that's smaller than that branch. And both of these are permitted by the standard. And also heading cut. And the heading cut is where you really don't have a branch that you're cutting back to. What you're doing is you're cutting mid-branch and you're trying to encourage dormant buds in that branch to come out. And I don't know about you, but when I was going through like arboriculture classes in college, I developed a fear of using reduction cuts and heading cuts. And this is kind of one of those things about this course that was in a lot of ways life-changing, is that both are okay and they have their purpose. What really blows your mind is you really should be using reduction cuts more often. So heading cuts. What's something you think of when you hear the word heading cut? Topping, yeah. So this is a tree kind of near the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's made into a hat rack. It's kind of hard to see with that foliage and that building behind it, but I don't know if anybody else notices this, but anywhere you have a lot of orchards, I tend to see a lot more topping. And the reason I think this is a theory, but I think what's happening is in orchard production, to produce more fruit, you are doing a lot of fillarding and a lot of heading cuts to produce more fruit. And that is good for that purpose. But it's not good when somebody says, I'm worried about that tree falling on my house, so I'm going to cut it off where it's too high. That's bad, that's topping. This is kind of an example where maybe heading cuts are maybe a little bit more appropriate, and we'll get into that, but heading cuts give us a good opportunity to elongate the lifespan of the tree, and we'll talk more about that.
Okay, and since we're talking about pruning cuts, I was just doing a little bit of pruning. I went back to this, it's a crabapple tree, and I saw these cuts that I did 3 to 5 years ago. And I just encourage everybody, if you're in the same place, go back and look at your older cuts, because it's really interesting to see like how it tries to close over, and you can, tell if like your cuts did pretty good or not so good. So it's interesting, like the first one, obviously there's like some inclusion here. So it's interesting how it's just really put it on down there, but it's still trying to do something. It was a pretty big cut. This one here, it looks like it was a kind of old stub that I just cut back. But it's cool to see it doing its thing. This one, it's like, okay, it's doing its thing. I didn't cut into the branch collar. So that's good. And they kind of say, if you see like that circle, then that's how it's supposed to respond. Again, here, it's getting smaller, so that one's doing good. And then that may have just been a smaller cut, but now it's completely closed. But yeah, it's just really fun to go back and look at your cuts, because I think the reality is like, I've definitely made a lot of bad cuts, right? But we learned from looking at that, so that's cool.
This is a PSA. I don't know who here needs to hear this, but stop it. Don't be painting those wounds, leave it alone. And this is kind of where we get into why are we pruning? And I like Forestry comics, and this is kind of getting at I think something that we've have been conditioned to do in our communities is look at trees and say, we're doing it all the time. We're prescribing what needs to be done. And in some cases, we're looking at a tree that's in really bad condition and we are going straight to cut it down. So everyone stand up. And then I want you to pick up an object that's in front of you, so it could be your phone, water bottle, and you're gonna hold it straight out. How long do you think you could hold this object up like that? Couple minutes. How would you be able to hold it up longer? Put more support, or you could bend your arm maybe, bring in that force closer to your body. All right, sit down. So the point of this is we need to think about this with trees. How can we reduce the forces that are on those outer limbs and make them stronger? And that's really bringing in that energy, that force into the tree.
Okay, so everybody should have the form in front of them. We're just gonna kind of talk about, really conditions of concern, objectives, and diameter range, numbers of cuts. We're just gonna kind of hone in on that. But other things to point out that are kind of cool, like you can even notate just above conditions of concern, like pruning system to be applied. I've only used natural, but there are other ones. And then another really cool thing is the pruning interval, which is cool. And, me with the town, that could be helpful because, for me, it's usually like 3 to 5 years, but it's probably going to be on 5 year. But that may even help, if I'm prescribing 5 years, whoever tree worker is, they may know that and kind of consider that and factor it in, right? So one of the big things that starts with are conditions of concern. Now anyone who's done the tree risk, the track, this kind of comes from that realm. And I think, Gilman had kind of been in that realm too. And so you start there, which is cool, which, for me, so I just recently put out a PFQ trying to use some of this new knowledge. So I'm still working through it. And what I thought was cool about that is, I could be looking for conditions of concern. And then if something's pinging, I may just be like, well, I need to just do a tree risk assessment, or I need to hire someone else to do tree risk. It kind of gets that up in the forefront. I mean, I went to town, so I'm always kind of thinking about risk anyhow. But that also lets whoever's doing a tree work know what the conditions of concern are, right? Because, this is going out, someone's getting hired, and then it's just good communication. And then after that, so then we have objectives. And then we get in, which objectives, I would, I'm kind of use myself as a guinea pig. I haven't done a lot of pruning knowledge in a while, but my head was in the objectives realm. Maybe a lot of us are kind of in the objectives realm. And then they took it further and went to branches to prune. Now, I definitely wasn't calling out as specific, branches to prune that they're giving us the ability to do. So, you can talk about the location in the tree. You can talk about number of cuts in the tree, as well as diameter of the cuts. And then even the type of cuts, removal or reduction. So they give us an ability to be really specific, which is interesting. Okay, yeah.
So how much do you prune off of a tree though? Did anyone see that on the form? No? The answer is as much as necessary to complete your objective. I don't know if all of you were kind of trained under the percentages of like, don't take more than 25% of the tree off, like ever. Well, you can throw that rule out. You don't need to worry about that rule anymore. It's as much as you need to take off to achieve your objective. And sometimes a lot is necessary. This is a choke cherry tree in a park in Alamosa, and it's got some stuff going on. There's a dead limb on one side, and then it's got several co-dominant leaders coming off of it, and it had a lot going on. And this is how the tree looked after I pruned it. Does anybody know how much percentage I took off of this tree?
75.
You're gonna get a lot of different numbers. And that's where, oh, Heather, you got a question?
So that number, that percentage will be here, the live fishing, not dead material, so that's something to be.
Right,
This is definitely.
yes, yes. So for the online folks, so Heather's question was, that percentage that we've been taught not to take off that has been historically applied to no more, live tissue to take off. This is a very big, change because it doesn't matter if it's live or dead in this scenario, because it's about what you need to take off to meet your objective. And, you know, I was hearing a couple different numbers from people. I heard 75%. Somebody thinks that it took 75% of this tree. But some might think that it was lower than that. And so that's kind of the point of this. You're gonna get a wide range of estimates of the percent of live crown that you're taking off the tree. And therefore it lacks accountability. It's not useful. So that's probably the biggest takeaway I had from the training. Would you say, Carl, that like, we're not doing that because we're trying to be more accountable for what we're doing when we're making pruning cuts.
You don't have significant experience, your objectives can be completely flawed. So if you don't have those baseline percentage of live tissue, which is the photosynthesizing part of the tree that needs food, and you don't take the holistic approach of what's going on with that tree in terms of stress, and there's biological stress, environmental stress, disease, insect, right? It doesn't add up. You know what I mean? Where you have a baseline of percentage of live tissue, and you don't exceed that, right? There's a preservation element in that, where you're gonna retain enough leaf.
Photosynthetic like ability, yeah. So I think we talked about this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And like, I think one of the things with some of this is, yeah, we can get carried away of just focusing on just pruning. And Lindsay Purcell was the other trainer in it. And one of the things he says is make sure to take the temperature of the tree. Right. And I think that's almost when I was like working through this myself and figuring out how am I going to use it. And I was actually creating my own spreadsheet. I almost wanted to put that at the top, like, what is the tree's temperature? Because it does matter, like how viable is the tree? That's going to affect how I'm going to prune it, right? And how I'm going to write a prescription. So I think that is a good point. Yeah, but and for someone that's less experienced, maybe having some of those trigger points could be helpful. But the same thing with the pruning cuts and looking at how your pruning cuts respond. I think sometimes we're all learning from how we prune a tree too and how it responds. That's what I would say to that.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we'll get into later, like in terms of filling out one of these prescription forms and then reading it and interpreting it and applying it. If those of you who are climbers and who are actually up in the tree, you might observe conditions differently than what somebody is observing from the ground. And you have the autonomy to make decisions based on your experience on whether or not maybe, it's not a good idea to make that many cuts. And some of you might think that I took way too much off of this tree, and I was sitting there contemplating making a cut right here at that co-dominant union. And I had a couple of thoughts going through my head. Can I reduce this branch further out to slow that down? There really wasn't an option there. When will I be back to this tree? I'm on a 2-year contract with the city of Alamosa, so I'm probably not gonna come back to the tree. Aesthetics, it looks weird. Managing storm risk. I don't know about you, but after that first heavy snow you get, the choke cherries are the ones that I always see that are torn to shit. So I couldn't, so don't hate me. So we're gonna use a little bit of the form to practice here on some trees. So want to walk through some of the key objectives when it comes to younger trees versus mature trees. So when we are talking about pruning of young trees, what we are trying to do is promote long-term good structure. Part of that is developing and maintaining a dominant leader. Notice I didn't say central leader, because sometimes that leader might not necessarily be in the center of the tree. Anyone who pruned a hybrid elm before? Those things are crazy. And finding one that's central might not be possible. Like this guy. This is my hollow nose. So space first order branches along the dominant leader. We are ideally looking for a beautiful excurrent structure where you're getting great scaffold branches off the main lead. We're gradually removing temporary branches to minimize pruning cuts. So picking out where our temporary branches are going to be, and we're not going to cut those off prematurely to result in some poor live crown ratios and create one throw issues. So those are the things that we're focused on with younger trees. Carl's going to talk about mature trees.
Okay, these are from Alamosa, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the Siberian elms. So some objectives when looking at it, reduce likelihood of branch/tree failure under normal conditions, reduce likelihood of dead branch failure, extend lifespan, increase vertical clearance, encourage more wildlife, allow more sunlight to reach the ground under the crown. Now, you know, as we were talking about, like the challenge with these kind of trees, and this is classic kind of municipal trees, is sometimes this is what you got, doesn't look great. You know, someone might say, well, that's just look, that would just be a removal, you know. But the reality is the little shade that these create is very, very valuable. So we're probably still going to be thinking, well, let's do some mitigation through pruning. And we might think, you know, longer term, some shadow planting or this or that, but we can still try to figure out how to use pruning in this situation for these older mature trees. So just an exercise. We wanted, I guess we can go back to that slide.
Yeah, let's go there. So
We just wanted, yeah, we wanted everyone to think about how would you write a prescription for that? You know, just with your current, you know, where you're at.
No bit.
Right.
Can we turn it into a sculpted bear, just like?
Right. See what?
Yeah, you can make art out of it. So I think maybe give you guys like 2 minutes to find a buddy and maybe talk through this with this mindset of like, how would you prune this tree? And then maybe we can get some results.
Yeah, I just want to hear some feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, we're gonna get back to it. Okay, all right. The reason we wanted you to really do that was to talk to each other and just consider, like, I'm just curious, was like everyone using the same language when talking about how they might call out what they would do?
My buddy said third order branches. That came out of his mouth.
Okay.
Wow, what a smarty pants.
Because, you know, I think part of this training to me, which was really valuable, is, a lot of us could look at a tree like this, but we may call out like different things and call it, maybe we're going to the same goal, but we're using different language. And that was valuable for me when I was in the class, when they would make us do kind of work together and talk about what would you say? So it's a part of us are trying to get this language together, so we're all using similar language. So I think that's a good part of that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious about what you all came up with about how would you prune this tree? Does anybody want to share?
Definitely removal of all the dead wood, and as many of the third order branches as we could. Try to revitalize that a little bit. And I still say make a better bear than it does a tree, but.
Yes, probably, but I think going back to the point, this is one of maybe 40 Siberian elms around the perimeter of this park, and they all look like this. No offense, Andy, I know you're online. This is a heavily used park. How would it look to the community if I said, cut them all down? Not good. What can we do instead of removals to reduce risk and elongate the lifespan of these trees? And that's kind of where those heading cuts in, because I think you're looking at like, well, I don't have a lot to cut back to. That's where those heading cuts are very important. And it will sucker. You'll get a lot of suckers off. What are those suckers doing? They're photosynthesizing. They're bringing sugars into that tree. And that will help this tree live a little bit longer. Where, yes, it's a removal eventually, but we can slow that process down.
And I guess that's the rub with me, and I hear what you're saying, that's exactly right. But like you said, we come back to them so often. As an arborist, I'm in a customer's lawn, I just see a dangerous tree, that's all I see there. You've got to have the understanding that, listen, we're going to do this reduction, we're going to do some heading cuts, but I have to be back here in after 3 or 5 years because this tree eventually got to go away.
Right, and you definitely have to make those considerations about how you approach these types of situations. And
The pruning interval, you can.
yeah, the pruning interval is something that you can put on your prescription as well. And Ed Gilman, in his presentation about talking about this, he gives this example of this very large tree that's in his backyard of his home. And he was very good at documenting exactly what was done for this tree over, it had to have been a 20-year time frame where it was having issues early, and yeah, maybe at that point it could have been a removal, but instead what he instructed his arborist to do was slowly move that arm in and reduce the risk that's in those branches, and he elongated that lifespan of that tree by doing so.
I would be planting other trees. I mean,
Exactly.
Age diversification.
Yes, so planting shadowed plantings underneath this tree in the anticipation that that tree will be removed eventually. So, like I said, mind blowing. Yes, question.
How would you differentiate on these trees between a heading cut and topping?
Repeat.
So the question is, how do you differentiate a heading cut from a topping cut? And the answer is, what are you making the cut for? If you're trying to generate those buds that are dormant to come out and bring out that flush of growth to create photosynthesis, that's okay. If you're cutting it here because it's too tall, no, not okay.
Okay, so now we're gonna get into writing a prescription. I'll use myself as a guinea pig here again.
All right, guys. I know.
So this is in Carbondale, this is a classic Siberian elm tree that I see a lot, right? I'm kind of like your classic guy, started as a ground guy, then climbed. So I kind of use this very simple terminology, probably other people do too. So I just see this, I see, okay, multi-trunk Siberian elm, drooping branches. Okay, objectives, light limbs, clearance over street, 14 feet, deadwood, 2 inch and larger, like very simplified. For whatever reason, that's what people were doing when I was learning stuff, right? So like it works. If your company knows what's going on, it can be okay. However, after this class, I can really call out a lot of, be a little bit more specific. And again, I like being able to say what the conditions of concerns are there. So the tree worker knows what that is. So if there's something that I can't see when the tree worker is up there, he knows clearly what my conditions and concerns are. He knows what my objectives are. So he can make some calls or he can give me a call, be like, hey, I'm seeing this. What do you want me to do? So that's cool. So now I say conditions of concerns, codominant trunks with bark conclusions. Now I saw that before, but I didn't call it out, like on my pruning prescription. But now I'm calling it out. Overextended branches. That's just long branches, and branches obstructing road and parking. So my objectives are reduce overextended branches, which is that leverage thing, right? If they're going out, we just want to make them shorter. That's what we do a lot in older trees. Create 14-foot clearance from road and parking. So that's objectives. And now when I get down to branches to prune, now I haven't integrated number of cuts or sizes of cuts yet. That one's a little bit hard for my brain to digest, especially on these bigger trees. There's just so much going on. It's easier on a smaller tree, but it's a little bit more difficult for my brain on a bigger tree. But I'm going to try to, in the course, they talk about, well, you can get calibrated, have your contractor count, number of branches on the ground, make an estimate for you so you can estimate that. So, but for right now, what I'm saying is reduction and removal cuts on ends of longest branches that extend beyond the main body of the crown. So key thing is I'm saying ends of longest branches. I'm not trying to call out first order. There's just so much going on. And this could be a typical tree where there's a lot going on, but I'm still saying I want you to work on the ends. I don't want you to take anything on the interior because we don't want them to lion's tail, right? So I can call that out and be specific about it. Which, overextended branches. And then, remove dead branches 2 inches downer and larger, which is just like common. It's anywhere you see that throughout the tree. So I would say for me, this is part of the course that's been really helpful. It's allowed me to be more specific. And because I was just using very basic language, typical tree person, I may even just walk the tree and not even say anything and just start climbing it, right? I know what to do, so it's pretty cool.
All right. So for like the last 5 minutes here, so and I think we'll just do it together out loud, and I'm gonna just have people call out. But what is the condition of concern with this tree? Can anyone call that out? Yes. You don't need a leader. Okay. So no clear dominant leader in this tree. So really that's the answer. So you can both start. So okay. So the pruning objective would be to define a dominant leader. And which branch are you going to prune on this tree? If you just make a one cut.
The right hand top one where it bees out, I want this
Yeah.
side here. I need a laser pointer.
Yeah, so. And I think whatever yeah, so you're right, so I did the one on the left, but kind of look at what's happening further up in the branch, and if you're starting to see other codominant branches emerge, maybe that's the one that you remove and you reduce that branch down to. So.
And yeah, just side note, because Gilman's teaching the course, you get a lot of structure pruning methodology.
So this is don't laugh, it's a champion tree. Literally, so this is the witch elm in Denver City Park, also known as the Shakespeare elm. So champion tree, very special tree. What is the condition of concern for this tree? Dead branches? Yeah, it's got some definite declines in health. So the big one is the dead branches. So that's your condition of concern. What's the pruning objective? Remove the dead branches. There might be maybe some opportunity for some heading cuts to create some photosynthetic energy in some of those limbs. Because in a lot of these cases, you're probably not going to have a great production or removal cut to make. So you're probably looking at a lot of heading cuts. And part of that, defining which branches to prune, you can give a conservative range of like the size of the cut. And this is kind of to somebody else's question earlier about looking at the condition of the tree prior to proceeding. Part of that is knowing your species and its ability to compartmentalize the decay and the presence of heartwood. And so you definitely want to consider how large the cuts are you make based on the species and your experience. Let's see, Ken, how many minutes do we have left? 2 minutes. So we can do a couple more. So what's the condition of concern with this elm?
Aspect ratio of those limbs.
Yeah, aspect ratio is a big concern. You can't really see it, but this limb here is very much competing for that lead position. So this is a tree I pruned last year, and this is taken like a week ago. It already needs to be pruned again. So be aggressive with those elms. Don't be afraid to cut more than you think you should, is my advice on those. But so condition of concern, really maintaining that dominant leader and reducing that presence of the higher aspect ratio branches in the tree. So you're going to be doing some reduction cuts mostly in this tree to meet that objective.
We used to have like a really short time, but I wanted to read off some of these concepts for contemplation that I learned from the class, kind of like meditations. So first one, the location of removed branches in the tree is more important than the amount removed. So making the cuts in the right locations. Yeah. Another one, in young trees, it is possible to correct most structural defects. In mature trees, many defects cannot be corrected, but they can be mitigated through pruning. It's like another one, just like, yeah. Okay, let's do more. Another one, branches that are the largest today will still be the largest 5 to 10 years from now, and will be in the same general orientation unless pruned to guide them in the desired direction. So it's our pruning can guide how the tree is going to grow, right? Okay. Last one, pruning a branch slows growth on that branch in proportion to the pruning dose and can direct future growth by invigorating parts of the tree that were not pruned. So like specifically when we're talking about structure pruning and we want it to go up and have a dominant leader, we can prune lower ones back. You know,
And drive that.
drive the energy up. So those are just some concepts and fun to just sit on.
Clearly, this is controversial for some of you. So, feel free to talk to Carl after. But if you are willing to stick around, we are offering kind of a bonus round after the conference if you want to kind of help and talk through some pruning outside, and we can even play around with some of the trees around campus. So.